Hello, hello. This is Jennifer from Jen the Bookworm, and I'm coming to bring you something I've not done yet on my channel, though I haven't done much. It's only been a couple of episodes, but I want to do some episodes that really explore whether or not a book was adapted into a movie or TV show successfully. So I'm tentatively calling it books to screen, but I wanted to really talk about, does this adaptation add something? Is it as good as the book? Is it not? There's a couple of things that I want to go over. Specifically, I want to look at what did the book do better and what did the movie do better, if anything. What changes that they made were understandable changes, and what were unforgivable changes that maybe were made when moving from a book to screen. I also want to look at, did the actors embody the role that they were asked to play? And then overall, I'm going to rate whether or not I think the adaptation was successful. There will be spoilers. This series is going to be a spoiler series because there's no way to talk about whether or not I think they were adapted well if I don't give some spoilers. So just be aware. But this book, I don't think will be a big problem. It's an old book. So today I want to talk about Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. And the book was written in 1976, or published in 1976. And the movie came out in 1994. So, I mean, this is an old movie and this is an old book. But I recently started rereading, in the beginning of the year, was rereading Anne Rice and specifically The Vampire Chronicles. And I recently rewatched the movie, so I thought this would be a good one to start us off on. So the book itself, for those of you who may or may not know, it's a book about a vampire giving an interview and kind of doing a tell-all, which of course they're supposed to try to keep their existence a secret from humans, but he's kind of doing a tell-all, and he goes through his life and what it was like, the journey from being immortal to being immortal, and some of the trials and tribulations of that journey for him. I really loved the book. I really like the way Anne Rice writes. She is very elegant with her words, but she is wordy, but it gets really dense sometimes, but it's very elegant prose. I really always love the way that she phrases things and she paints a picture. So I like that about her. When the movie came out in the 90s, and it was Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. It actually had commercial success. It was a movie that had Anne Rice's stamp of approval, which is always helpful to have the author sign off on what you're doing when you're adapting. So let's start with, what did the book do better? It's a big book. There's lots of words. So it really did better at giving detail, backstory. It really intricate. It was very intricate in how it detailed the way they saw things, the way they felt. So it went into a lot of detail. And so those details give the world life. And so that was something the book did better. Back in the 90s, we were still doing, if movies were over 90 minutes, that was generally a problem. There wasn't very many really long movies back then. I think the exploration of the characters themselves and their relationships were done better in the book. The relationship between particularly Louis and Lestat was miscategorized in the movie quite a bit. In the book, they had their problems because they were different kinds of vampires. But if you look at, even throughout the Vampire Chronicles, throughout the other books in the series, you can see that they were kind of, Louis and Lestat were kind of each other's true love. But they're not portrayed that way in the movie at all. And they're not really portrayed that way for much in the book, except for that there are times when In the book, it seems like they hate each other. They don't hate each other, they're frustrated with each other. Louis wants more information about the genesis of vampires, about where they came from and his people. And the only people that he has is Lestat, who won't give him information. And Lestat is frustrated because he really wants a companion, and he really wants this companion to stop asking so many questions that he's not allowed to answer. And you really kind of get the impression that he just won't answer. But if you read on through other books, you know that it's that he can't answer. He's not supposed to. So, but they still care about each other quite a bit, and that comes out better in the books than I think it does in the movie. In general, I think Lestat was a much better character in the book than he was in the movie. In the book, he was a charismatic, kind of an enigma to Louis, but he was charismatic, and although difficult sometimes, it wasn't without his reasons. But in the movie, they really there's no charisma there, in my opinion. I didn't really get charismatic vampire from Lestat, from Tom Cruise. I got spoiled, childish, manipulative brat. So now, what did the movie do better? This is my opinion. Please do not fillet me. But I don't think the movie did anything better than the book. It's not a bad movie. It's not. It's actually a very good vampire movie. And had I watched the movie before reading the book, I would have thought, wow, that's a great movie. But I had more recently read the book when the movie first came out, and I became that annoying person who was like, no. In the book, it's like this. No. Oh, that's not like that. Okay, let me tell you, in the book, and people around me were just like, would you let us watch the movie? So I became annoying. But they got so many things wrong, and so many inaccuracies, and some of them unforgivable, in my opinion. So what changes did they make that I thought were understandable? First off, you have to point out Claudia's age. So Claudia was played by Kirsten Dunst, and in the book, she's 5. Claudia is a character that comes into play. Louis is trying not to drink from humans, trying to drink from rats. He still has a respect for humanity and human life. And he and Lestat were starting to really have a lot of friction over this. And in a moment of weakness, he drank from Claudia. Lestat was following, found this out, turned the girl into a vampire in the hopes that adding Claudia to the mix would make Louis stay. And it did. So Claudia was 5 in the book, but she grew up mentally, but not physically. But the book categorizes them as lovers, not sexual lovers. In the books, there isn't really a sexual component. Lovers kind of more means companions or partners, but they did sleep in the same coffin together, and they were affectionate to one another in a way that maybe 2 adults would be. And that's awkward to try to adapt that to film. I mean, I don't know why Brad Pitt, who played Louis, would ever agree to be that outwardly kind of affectionate to a 5-year-old. And that's no good. The relationship between Louis and Lestat was also changed. But I kind of understand, because they only had 90 minutes. They weren't going to be able to go into all the background of Lestat and Louis and why they were the way they were. So I understand changing the relationship somewhat on screen. They made them less adversarial. I mean, they were adversarial to some degree, but they made it less. Also, Armand is a character that comes into play a little bit later in the book. And they really downplayed Armand. He did not get much screen time. He was not much part of the story. But I sort of understand that too, because he's actually a huge part of the story when you read on later on in the Vampire Chronicles, but he was a huge part in Lestat's history. He was a huge part in Louis' history, but they don't really go into, they don't have time. Also, Armand was supposed to be kind of a teenage boy with the face of an angel, and Antonio Banderas at that time was not that. I mean, he's handsome, but he was older, way older than the character was supposed to be. It really kind of made him Dracula-esque, in my opinion. So what changes did they make that was unforgivable? The ending. The ending was an unforgivable change. And they didn't have to. They didn't have to do it like this. They messed up. And I don't understand why they did the ending this way. It was not good. At the end of the book, Daniel is like, you know, turn me into a vampire. Daniel's the man who Louis is giving the interview to. And he's a journalist or whatnot. And he's very interested in the life of a vampire. Now he's just sat and listened for hours and hours about Louis talking about being a vampire. And Louis was hoping, I guess, to impart a different message than what Daniel picked up. What Daniel decided was, turn me into a vampire. I will be your companion and I will love it. And Louis is like, are you kidding me? I was just telling you how bad it was. He's like, no, do it. I can, you know. He ends up drinking from him and leaving him sort of for dead. And we find out in the third book that Daniel did get turned into a vampire by Armand. But in the movie, he, you know, rushes down to his car and he's listening to the tape cassette from his interview and kind of trying to think about, you know, what he's going to do with the story. And Lestat happens to pops up from the back seat and drinks from him, and in a very dramatic way, he stops and he tells him, I'm going to give you the choice that I never had, which is what he said to Louis when he was turning Louis into a vampire. I'm going to give you the choice that I never had. In the book, he was not so, like, consent heavy. It wasn't about consent, and they didn't, in the books, the first book, the second book, he never was, like, lamenting the fact that he didn't have a choice to become a vampire. So I don't know why they decided to make that a defining characteristic of Lestat, you know. He was before his time with consent, except for with Claudia, because it's not like he asked her if he could turn her into a vampire. He did it, not because of any feelings he had about her. He turned her into a vampire so that he could manipulate Louis into staying with him. So where was his concern about consent then? So now I want to talk about, did the actors embody the characters that they were hired to play? I'm only going to go through like 4 characters. There are, you know, more, but these are the 4 main characters. Tom Cruise plays Lestat, and I did not enjoy that at all. It was very difficult to look at Tom Cruise and not think Top Gun and stuff like that. It kind of threw me out of the story. It kind of distracted me from the movie to see Tom Cruise. And I didn't like the way he played Lestat. Not only did I not like him, I didn't think he was good for the role, but I just didn't like the way he did it. So I don't think he was a good choice for that character. He was supposed to be charismatic and playful, but he came across as maniacal and childish, and I just didn't like it. Louis, played by Brad Pitt, I also don't think that was necessarily the best move, although I think he did a good job acting it. After a while, he didn't really throw me out of the story. He didn't distract me too much. I thought he did okay, but it wouldn't have been my first pick. Kirsten Dunst, I thought she was an excellent Claudia. I think she stole the show in some places. When she's all mad because she cuts off her hair and it grows back, or because she wants to have a womanly body, and Lestat says, well, that's just not your lot in life. and she gets mad, and she is a little 11-year-old girl who hadn't done that much acting yet, out acting Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. I mean, she was phenomenal. So yes, I think she was a good choice. I think she did a great job. No complaints there. Christian Slater played Daniel, and I really think that they wasted their time, because Christian Slater at the time in the 90s, he was much bigger than he is now, but they wasted money because the reporter isn't a huge character. We didn't need a name brand actor, if you will, to play that part. Plus, Christian Slater was very forgettable as Daniel. The character was forgettable. The acting was forgettable. You could have put anybody in that role and it would have been fine. So overall, did I think this book was adapted well to screen? I mean, I think it's not a surprise. No, I didn't think it was. I did think it was a good movie in and of itself. And now that I watch it divorced from the book, it's been a few years, and I like the movie. I watch it. I just rewatched it a little earlier this year because I liked it. It's just not a great adaptation of the book. Overall, I'd give the book 4 stars. I'd give the movie 3 stars, but the adaptation, 1 star. It just wasn't well done, in my opinion. I do want to say it's okay if you feel differently than I did about the book, the movie, the adaptation. That's okay. We can all agree to disagree on these kinds of things. Sometimes I'm going to hate on something you love, and sometimes you're going to hate on something I love. But I appreciate you coming on to listen to my opinions about the book and the movie and the adaptation. And I hope to bring some more movie to screen adaptations. If you have any suggestions that you'd like me to talk about how something was adapted, if I've read it, if I've watched it, I certainly am open to some suggestions. So just leave me a comment down below. Please consider liking and sharing my video. That really helps out the channel. As a slight update, I know I said the next time I have a video out, I'm hoping to have the background fixed, and I didn't get to that this time. The person that is going to come over and help me is hit a really busy point in her life right now, but we're hopefully going to get the backdrop a lot more colorful and bright, and hopefully I'll be bringing you a video with the new background soon. Thank you very much for your time and for listening to me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.